To a world where everyone and their sister has a podcast comes another one. Join us weekly as we explore the dark back alleys of irreverence and the spider-infested corners of nerdkind. This is the Irreverent Nerd Podcast. Greetings, fellow nerds. Welcome to episode 2 of the Irreverent Nerd Podcast. Those of you who stuck with me after listening to episode 1, thank you. Thank you for coming back. I am genuinely excited about this podcast and where it could go. I would love for it to take off, but I'm just excited also about the creative process. I have a lot of ideas already. I've got my first 4 episodes already mapped out, and I'm going to try to have episodes mapped out ahead of time. I've got ideas for other episodes. I didn't realize how fertile my nerdiness was. So I'm going to try to have an outline for each episode. I'm going to try to keep each one to 15 to 20 minutes, like 20 minutes max, because I know your time is valuable, right? So is mine. When I'm listening to these, like, often I'm on my commute to work. When I'm listening, not to my podcast necessarily, but to podcasts in general. And most of us don't have more than a 15 to 20 minute commute. Some of us have longer. You know, if you have an hour or more, I'm sorry. But you probably get a chance to use those times to listen to audiobooks, podcasts, talk to friends on the phone, call your dad, you know, your wife, your mom, whoever. So hopefully you're making the most of it. And if you choose to allow me to accompany you on that journey on a weekly basis, say every Wednesday or maybe the day after on Thursday, thank you. Thank you for letting me join you. So the first thing on my outline is actually the Batman's coming. So, okay, any of you who enjoy DC Comics or superhero movies, you know what's coming up next Thursday. Yes, I know there's like an early release on Tuesday for big fans. I didn't get into that showing. Like I looked at the tickets, and the only remaining seats, at least for my local theater, were like right up front, and I hate sitting right up front in the theater. I like to be at least 4 or 5 rows back. Like my ideal is, about 5 rows back, kind of in the middle. Like that's like the sweet spot. So I got some tickets for the official opening night, which is next Thursday. My buddy and I have a fellow nerd. He and I have been friends for a long time, and any big time superhero movie that we're both excited about, we go and see it together. Like, almost every one. Like there's a few that we've missed here and there because life gets in the way sometimes. But for the most part, like he is my movie friend, if you will. I mean, obviously our friendship extends beyond that, but we make a point. Each superhero movie, like that's a place where we connect. We both enjoy that. We enjoy talking about it afterwards. His knowledge of comics and the comic world is much more extensive than mine. Like, sadly, I never got deeply into comics growing up. So that's a world that I've only dipped my feet into as an adult, really. I had a few comics growing up. I remember having one that had DuckTales, I think, like Scrooge McDuck Adventures and like a Donald Duck Adventures comic. But one of my early memories, and this is something I was thinking about talking about in today's episode, one of my earliest memories of Batman did actually come from a comic. So this was late 80s. I was living in South Carolina at the time, and my grandmother, I was hanging out with her, and we had stopped at some kind of store. I don't know if it was a convenience store, somewhere that sold comic books. And apparently I knew what Batman was at that point. I must have had some friends that had like Batman toys, or I had seen a commercial. I don't know if this was 1989, 1990. I'm not completely sure. If it was, then, those of you who lived through that time probably know that there was a bit of Batman mania, with Frank Miller's comics, like, really changed the landscape of comics in general, but particularly the Batman universe, like with the Dark Knight saga that he wrote. I believe it was late 80s. comic nerds, please correct me if I'm wrong about that, but my understanding it was late 80s that he came out with that. But things started getting a little darker, a little grittier, and up to that point, the only Batman, like the latest Batman movie that was out there was the 1966 Adam West version, which is great in its own right, but it's very campy. It doesn't take itself seriously, nor did it intend to, which is part of what makes it great. But I think fans were probably itching for something a little more serious, and then Tim Burton's Batman comes onto the scene. I believe it was 1989. Again, fellow nerds, correct me if I'm wrong. Don't mind being corrected. But that's my memory, is that it was 1989. It was definitely the late 80s. I know that much. That it came out, and then that was a big success, from what I understand. I've mentioned before that I grew up in a conservative religious tradition. So one of the aspects of that, and this is, please hear me when I say this is not me bashing my parents. I mean, every parent wants to protect their kids from what they believe is harmful in the world. One of the things that my parents were concerned about were the kind of movies that would play in the theater. And, so we didn't go to theaters growing up. We just didn't go. Now, we did watch movies, absolutely. Like, we watched movies at home, we rented movies, all that stuff. So I wasn't deprived of entertainment. It's just I didn't have an experience of going to the theater to see Batman. Plus, I wasn't 13 years old then, so even if we did go to theaters, I don't know that my parents would have let me go see a PG-13 movie at age 6. But I knew about it. Obviously, the toys were out there. But where I really started... Well, before I jump into that... So the next thing on my list is my experience with Tim Burton's Batman was negative at first. But I want to explain why. Like, the first time I saw it, I think I've only watched it once all the way through. I know. Batman fans, hate on me if you want. I do plan to watch it again, actually, leading up to... I'm going to do a little bit of a mini Batman marathon leading up to the release of the new Batman movie next Thursday. And I do plan to rewatch it. And I will say the first time I saw it, I was an adult. So in fairness, my experience probably would have been very different had I seen it as a kid. But I was aware of it. Like, I knew about it. It was in the culture. Like, I saw the toys at the toy store. I had Batman toys, all that stuff. But my first entertainment experience with the Batman as a kid was Batman the Animated Series. Came out, I believe it started in 1991, right around there, 91, 92. And any of you who have seen it, or even if you've only seen some of the DC Universe animated movies that have come since then, you've probably heard Kevin Conroy as Batman and Mark Hamill doing the voice of the Joker. To me, they're both, honestly, no joke, still my favorite actors for both characters. I'm not joking when I say that. I think Kevin Conroy did a better Batman than Christian Bale. And I love Christian Bale. I love the Nolan movies. But if I had to pick one actor, it's Kevin Conroy. I'm sorry. And some of that is nostalgia. But the dude rocked it, man. Like, he knocked it out of the park, right? Like, he was the first person to do a regular... Like, he has done more Batman content than any actor, for one thing. He did, I think 3 or 4 seasons of the animated series. He's done a number of animated movies as the Batman since then. But Batman the Animated Series, man, that was my jam. Like, I think it started... I don't remember if it had started when I was in 3rd grade. So I started 3rd grade in the fall of 1991. I'm trying to recall if I ever, watched it when I came home from school. It's possible, but where I have a clearer memory of watching it is the following year when I was in 4th grade. That's when... Here's another part of my background. My parents started homeschooling me when I was in 4th grade. And I was homeschooled all the way through 12th grade. So that's a big part of my story, but it's not super relevant to this right now. But my first really clear memory of watching afternoon cartoons was in 4th grade. So after our schoolwork was done for the day, at that time we were allowed to watch, I think on weekdays, like on school days, we're allowed, like during the school year, obviously, we were allowed to watch 1 hour of TV. So we could watch a half hour of entertainment TV and a half hour of like PBS, which I'm grateful. I'm really grateful that my parents had restrictions on that, because I don't think too much TV is not a good thing, I don't think, for the development of child's brains. So I'm glad that they had restrictions on that, and I'm glad that they required that we do at least half of it as PBS. I still enjoy watching PBS. You know, my kids watch PBS kids shows all the time, and I'm so grateful for that, because it helps teach them. By the way, I have 3 kids. I don't know if I mentioned that. I have 3 beautiful, wonderful girls, but I'll talk about that another time. For now, that was my first memory of watching afternoon cartoons, right? Was Batman the Animated Series. I think it came on at like 4 p.m., if memory serves me. 4 p.m. The WB didn't exist back then. So I'm trying to remember what channel it came on. I'm not really sure, now that I think about it. But regardless, it came on around 4, and that was when like the new episodes were coming out. So man, I loved that. You know, and obviously as time went on, like I watched the reruns that would come on as it went into syndication. Then as I got older, like I remember when I was in my 20s and I got my first iPod, I got this, like, I think it was a 200 gigabyte. Might have been a 200 or 250 gigabyte iPod, and it had the screen, and you could watch movies and TV shows on it. And I was so excited about that. And I think I bought an entire season of Batman the Animated Series back then on my iTunes account. Sadly, I think I lost access to that original iTunes account, so I don't have that full season anymore. I do have some episodes that I've bought in my later years. But yeah, back in my 20s, when I got my first iPod, I bought like an entire digital season of Batman the Animated Series. Probably watched it all the way through, I'm sure. And also in my 20s, I started, like, as my friendship with my fellow nerd, whom you'll actually get to meet next week. He and I are going to see the Batman together, and we plan to, this is a preview for you, we plan to do a bonus episode where we review the Batman. It'll probably happen right after the movie, definitely the day after, so I plan to post the review the day after, and obviously there's going to be spoiler warnings, so if y'all aren't seeing it opening night, don't listen to our review until after you see it. Please don't. Don't spoil it for yourself, unless you're one of those people that likes to spoil everything before you see it. I'm not one of those people. I'm a little more open to being spoiled on certain things now than I used to be, particularly with comic book movies, because I need to learn about this comic book world that I was not into as a kid. It's not that I had no interest in it, I just wasn't really a thing in my family, and I don't think my parents were real big on it. So now I'm like trying to catch up, right? And there's so much to catch up on. So like I do spoil myself a little bit on comic book movies, just trying to learn background to different characters and such. Anyway, so that's coming up next Friday. That's the plan. He's agreed to do that with me, so I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be fun. I've never done a joint movie review with someone before. I've never done a podcast movie review before. I've listened to, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. That's one of the things I love. I am a little bit of a cinephile, not like hardcore, like I haven't watched Tarkovsky or shit like that. But someday, like I haven't watched The Red Balloon, some of the classics, but I do love learning about filmmaking. There's a shout out to another podcast, Film Spotting. If you enjoy good film and you enjoy more intelligent film criticism, check out Film Spotting. Shout out. Anyway, so running up, I'm about out of time here. So that was my jam, right? Batman the Animated Series. Kevin Conroy is amazing. And to me, my favorite Joker is still Mark Hamill. His performance is so amazing. And the quintessential Mark Hamill performance to me is Batman Mask of the Phantasm. It was, the first animated Batman movie. It was rated PG, so it had more violence. It even had a little bit of blood. Gasp. Like, the animated series, like, there was a lot of gunfire, but no one ever got shot. Because they couldn't show that on a Y7 rating television show. But people were shooting guns all the time. I'm amazed they got away with that. But yeah, no one ever got shot. But when they made the movie and it was rated PG, like, people could actually get shot or knifed, and they could show a little bit of blood. So it was a much more serious movie. It's based on actually a comic book I'm rereading right now, Batman Year 2. And yeah, if you haven't seen Batman Mask of the Phantasm, it is it's definitely in my top 5 Batman movies. I think it's fair to say it's in my top 3. I think I can say that. But after I go through this little mini marathon, I'll let you know if that changes. But it's definitely up there in my top 5. Absolutely awesome Batman movie. Again, Mark Hamill, still the best Joker. And that's part of the reason why I did not like Tim Burton's Batman. And 2 words, Jack Nicholson. Sorry for those of you who think he was the best Joker. I got spoiled on Mark Hamill first before I ever saw Tim Burton's Batman. And I was like, what? No. No, like, I'm sorry, Jack Nicholson doesn't hold a candle to Mark Hamill when it comes to performance. Now, I don't know if Mark Hamill could have pulled off a live performance, but he probably could. I don't know if he looks the part. Like, he doesn't really look the part of the Joker, but you never know. With makeup, I mean, who knows? But yeah, Mark Hamill, still number 1. I think Heath Ledger would be number 2. Let's see. Honestly, some of the other guys who have done the animated Batmans would probably be up at number 3. And damn. I might rate Nicholson a little higher than Jared Leto. They're very different. The tonality is just very different. I think Nicholson was trying to channel a bit of Cesar Romero, and that's part of why I didn't like it. It didn't quite fit the tone of Tim Burton's movie, because he was trying to channel Cesar Romero. It's like if The Shining and the 1966 Batman movie had a baby, it would, it would come out sort of like the Joker from Tim Burton's Batman. Yeah, and I'm not a Nicholson fan, to be honest. I don't like the man. It just, something about him creeps me out. Even when he's just doing normal shit, like, I just don't like him very much. Sorry. Those of you who are fans, actually, I'm not sorry. I just, I don't like him. I don't like Jack Nicholson. Not a fan. So, but that being said, because I love Batman and I want to give it another chance, I am going to rewatch both Batman and Batman Returns. I'm going to at least rewatch those 2 before the upcoming movie. Because I've watched the Nolan one so many times, like, I could tell, I don't need to see those again, to be honest with you. I've watched them a lot. I kind of, had Nolan fatigue, really. Anyway, that's the 20-minute mark there, so I am going to sign off for now. I'm going to pause here, and then I'm going to record my closing statements. Anyway, peace, fellow nerds. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Irreverent Nerd Podcast. Join us next Wednesday. Join us. Who's us? Join me next Wednesday as I talk about whether I think Robert Pattinson will do a good job as the Batman. So, I'll see you then. Or you'll hear me then. Peace, fellow nerds.